School is now over and summer has begun. It is a really great time right now. And guess what else? I now speak 2 languages. I learned another language from high school, Orho Latina Nunc. And so is the case I learned Latin. It was no easy task. It was more like a difficult journey, and Latin was the hardest class I've ever took. Taking 75 minutes out of the approximate 165 days I spent in school amounts to 200 hours just to learn the basics. Though, in mio animo, I've gained a lot more knowledge than just being able to speak the words, so I think it's good enough. So, with me being emotionally absent during the school year, I want to tell you this is where part of the time went. But there's more to that. I said I learned something and now I'm gonna tell you about it. About what I did to learn Latin. So before I took a proper class to learn a language, I actually did try to make an attempt to understand some other non-English things. In the days when I played rural, unpopular IO online games, the games got so little traction that it had to take players from all across the world in order to keep its player base afloat. So there are a lot of different languages spoken in these games. So, not one to be isolated out, I looked to Google Translate to be able to learn some new words and to speak back to these people, particularly in Spanish. And I failed miserably. I did not get very far. I mean, I might know 30 words and 5 sentences. 2/5 from Dora, 1/5 from my parents, and 2/5 from actually learning on Google Translate. But here's the problem. A word in one sentence could look entirely different than in another. Ice is helio, and ice cream is halado. So, this is called inflection when the words change based on how they're used in a sentence. And this is just as fundamental to learning a language as the next thing, if not more. So the first thing I learned, or ought to have learned, is breaking up a sentence. You can have nouns, verbs, adjectives, and prepositions. Those and pronouns are just what's used in this sentence. You also have adverbs, conjunctions, and articles. So, with that out of the way, I can explain how this inflection thing works. So, casa casai, meaning house, is a noun of the first declension. A declension is a group of nouns that all have similar endings to each other. For example, 2 nouns such as casa and disciplina. Something that you might have noticed is that I have 2 words before house. This goes back to the inflected language concept. Casa and casai are 2 forms of the same word. They just serve different functions. If anyone remembers that thing from Schoolhouse Rock, nouns are a person, place, or thing. And to put it short, an English noun could be used for any one of these purposes, but it looks the same in any case. If you don't know the Latin language, you might not have known that I just made a pun there. Because for different purposes, Latin nouns have different endings, and these are called cases. So you have nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative, and vocative. As you can see, while the forms change, CAS remains in all of them. That's because for casa, CAS is the stem, which the endings are attached to. Latin is an ancient language that was created before Schoolhouse Rock, so the definitions for these cases are not just person, place, and thing. No, instead, forms of a noun are used in sentences, such as the one I used earlier. So, the nominative case, it only has 3 uses that I'm aware of, but I'm only going to cover one for the sake of time, and a noun in the nominative case is the subject of a sentence. When the first word of a sentence is nominative, you can usually determine that that word is the subject. Since a noun can be a person, place, or thing, you can also have multiple of a noun, and that's why all the cases have singular and plural forms. The next case on the list is genitive. The use I will be covering for this noun is possession. So basically, this sentence says that the money belongs to the master, and we put the possessed object or noun in the genitive case. Yeah, that was pretty quick. And now the use cases for the dative and accusative could go together really nicely, because dative and accusative can be used for indirect object and direct object respectively. The sentence "Mios equus donate meam pecuniam agricolae," or "my horse gives my money to the farmer," has both a direct and indirect object. Essentially, when a noun has something done to it, it's the direct object. When that action affects a secondary noun, that noun is the indirect object. And before we move on, I'd also like to talk about the pronunciation of Latin letters. So, Latin doesn't have the letters Y or W. Instead, in Latin, V is pronounced how English people would pronounce W, and G and N together would be pronounced as a Y. And for these letters that sound like each other in English, C is always pronounced K, like K, S is always S, and K is also pronounced K. And as you can see on the last word of this sentence, it ends with A and E. When an E directly follows an A, it's pronounced I, like how we'd pronounce I in English. And Latin vowels are weird. That little line above the second A is called a macron, and it means it's a long A. So, Latin vowels can either be long or short, and that changes their pronunciation. So, the vowels are pronounced as followed. Short A is pronounced long A is pronounced ah. Short E is pronounced eh. Long E is pronounced A, like the English A. Short I is pronounced I. Long I is pronounced E, like the English E. Short O is pronounced O, and long O is pronounced O, like in English, yeah. Short U is kind of weird. My teacher said it was pronounced like the U in put, so and long U is pronounced oo, like a double O. So just in case you ever wanted to pronounce this sentence, there you go. Anyways, back to the Latin cases charcuterie board. For the last two cases, I want to use a different declension noun, as there are multiple declensions. So, equus equi, meaning horse, is a second declension noun. And as you might notice, second declension nouns are declined differently from first declension nouns, except in the dative and ablative plural. So, next we have the ablative, which is really weird. Prepositions can mean different things depending on what nouns they're followed by, and so ablative is used there a lot. And then there's ablative of means, the means by which you do something. And so, if you see a noun in the ablative case, when you translate to English, you might need to add something like to, for, or by. And ablative has the most uses out of any case. It has other uses like personal agency, time to which, but I don't want to be Bill Nye the Latin guy in this video. And then finally, we have the vocative case. The vocative case is direct address in Latin. Most of the time, it's the same as the nominative in the first declension it is, and there might be a comma after it to indicate that it's the vocative. It only changes in second declension nouns ending in US, where it changes to E, and any nouns that end in IUS, such as filius, meaning son, just drop the US of the nominative singular altogether and just end with I. And so that's all I have to give for Latin nouns. I'm kind of on a deadline to release this video. You know, even after a year of learning, I still don't know what regetera ortel pay means. Like, there is a magic monster summoning language, and then there's Latin. As far as I know, it's absolutely untranslatable. And the reason I learned the language in the first place is because it helps you learn other languages. Well, I've learned a little bit of English since I took the class, but you know, maybe that's because of another reason. But you know, I did do enough Latin to understand some sentences, and I did enough Latin to learn my favorite Latin word. It's a second declension noun that ends in R, and it's ager, agri. It means field, and I like it because it ends in R. And also, before I end the video, I'm going to talk about Latin verbs. So essentially, they're broken up into 4 principal parts, and they also have 6 tenses. The past tense is called the perfect tense, and verbs also have conjugations, which is like declensions for nouns where verbs of similar endings are grouped up with each other. And here's some endings for you. Each tense of each conjugation has 6 forms, and there's first through third person and singular and plural. There's the perfect tense, which uses the third principal part. And well, yes, there's a fourth principal part. It's related with the passive voice, and the passive voice can go to hell. So yeah, in short, if you want to learn a language, it's gonna be hard. Well, yeah, that about wraps this glorious video up. I needed over 429 recording attempts to voice this video, and the editing looked a little something like this. And now for the big question, was it worth the time I spent? Well, it doesn't pay off in the short term, so barring trauma and all the sleep I lost, hell no! But you know, it did teach me a lot of stuff about other languages, and I could use it to make some pretty good jokes in the future, so it might pay off in about 3 years' time. Anyway, that's the end of this video. See ya.